Hello, everyone. My name is Marie Ranvelez, and I'm the Assistant Director for USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's event, Belonging as Survival, Creativity, Activism, and Community. Before we begin, I'd like to open with a land acknowledgement. By itself, a land acknowledgement is a small gesture, and it becomes meaningful when coupled with authentic relationship building, community participatory-based research practices, and informed intentional action. I believe that institutions such as USC and the individuals that work and learn within their walls have an obligation to Native peoples to educate themselves in a thoughtful, responsible, and respectful way. By presenting events like the one we have today, part of the work that we do at Visions and Voices is to make the invisible visible. All of us today are likely coming from many different places, and all of North America is unceded land. But I know that many of us are in the unceded territory of California. We acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions, and we honor these ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon. I am personally coming to you from a place now called Los Angeles, which is on the unceded traditional territory of the Tongva, Chumash, and Kizh peoples. We also honor the legacy of the African diaspora and recognize that this country would not exist without the free enslaved labor of Black people. We share these acknowledgements to pay respect to the original caretakers of this land, to raise awareness about histories that are too often erased or forgotten, and to affirm our commitment to social change. I encourage everyone to learn more about the land that you're on, its stewards, and how you can listen to and support them. I want to point specifically to the California Indian Culture Sovereignty Center at CSU San Marcos. We have shared the link in the chat. Some of what I just said just came directly from their land acknowledgement toolkit. You can learn from their research projects and support them. I hope you support their work monetarily. Thank you. I would now like to hand this off to one of the speakers and organizers for tonight's event. Adrian De Leon is an award-winning historian, poet, and multimedia educator at the University of Southern California, where he is a professor of American Studies and Ethnicity and serves on the steering committee of the Center for Trans-Pacific Studies. Please join me in welcoming Adrian De Leon.
Thank you so much for the generosity also from my fellow panelists. I'm not going to be here too long. I really want to provide the space and the vibes, and that's going to be a major theme tonight, the vibes, for us to share space together. And as one of my co-panelists, Jocelyn, says, enjoy this as a present that will never happen again, right? And before that, I would like to thank several people. First of all, Marie Velez for bringing us together and helping organize this event. Sunyoung, Nila, Jenny Lin, Kaya Press, APAS, and Visions and Voices for your support both in organizing as well as in coordinating, as well as the emergence and eventual book birth of today. Before I dive into the introductions, I would really like to remind us that today is a day of celebrating the senses, the full potential of not just our own bodies as sensory bodies, but what senses can do with helping us understand the world, understand each other, understanding our relationships with people and place. What sounds, according to the description, inspire our activism? What flavors do you connect with your creative pathways? And what does belonging feel like, and how does it help us survive? And so joining me, well, actually, before I introduce everyone, as a sensory event, I would like everyone to take up the sense of touch and of speech and voice as well. Join in on the chat. You'll be contributing on the Q&A. Feel free to use the chat for live responses. We'll be facilitating that as well. Make this feel like, you know, the vibe of a room that it is, albeit virtually. Imagine us as a space, this as a space where we are sharing it together, because we are. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce first Pato Hebert, who is an artist, educator, and organizer whose work explores the aesthetics, ethics, and poetics of interconnectedness. He works across a range of media, including photography, installation, sculpture, language, light, and graphic design. Chef Jocelyn Jackson's approach to cooking is informed by her passion for seasonal food, social justice, creativity, and community. She founded Just Us Kitchen and co-founded the People's Kitchen Collective to create food experiences that inspire people to reconnect with themselves, the earth, and one another with the goal of collective liberation. And last but not least, first of all, I just want to really appreciate like the multimodal work, the work of connecting to the senses, the earth, everything. I love it. I love it, and I'm really excited. And last but not least, Sita Baumick, who is an artist, writer, and educator who uses art as a strategy to connect memory and history with urgent social issues. Her work focuses on decolonization, the hierarchy of the senses, and the impact of migration. She is a founding member of the People's Kitchen Collective in Oakland, California, along with Jocelyn Jackson and Sakib Keval. Welcome, you three, and I'll just hand it over to you. And for everyone else in the chat, give a round of applause, throw up your hearts, throw up your emojis, all that.
I'm loving the chat. Thank you so much. This is what makes it feel live. I'm actually going to start by doing something that maybe I shouldn't in my studio, but that's what studios are for. I'm going to light a flare. As we think about navigation and constellations and lighting the way, I'm going to light this flare that it may guide our path this evening in conversation. And this sparkler, I love sparklers. It has a really complicated history. In Spanish, they're called luces de Bengala. And my Bengali, my dad is Bengali. And I always thought it was funny that luces de Bengala had this name. And it turns out that actually it has direct connection to the land. They were also known as Bengal lights, probably because Bengal was the chief source of saltpeter. The introduction of colors that could readily be recognized at a considerable distance opened up a much wider field for the use of flares at sea, from the Encyclopedia Britannica entry on flare. And so I think that as we center this conversation, as Jocelyn and Sakib like to remind me, for us, by us, how is it that we approach these complicated histories and center our own stories and our own experience? So may that light the way. The way that we start events at People's Kitchen Collective is also in song. And so I would love to invite Jocelyn to start us off in the only way I know how.
Thank you, Sita. It feels so sweet to be here sharing this space, making this space together. And one of the things that you are so strong in your conviction about is that our ancestors so often are providing a path for us to walk. And one of the traditions of my ancestors is gospel music and the words that are leading to freedom and to truth and to possibility, to imagining worlds that haven't been created yet. And this song stems from that tradition. I love you. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. One more time. I don't know if you heard me. Listen. I love you. I need you to survive. You are important to me. I need you to survive. Blessings on each of you for choosing to be a part of this circle of people. There are over 100 of you in this room together. There are over 100 of you that made the decision to be in a constellation together. Consider that you are stars in this space, choosing where you align, where you are situated in space, where you are meant to be cosmically. Don't sneeze at that. That's huge. And I look forward to us keeping that energy in this conversation together.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I'll say that given the power and the beauty of your voice, it's hard to imagine any anxiety creeping in, but we're human. And it's part of the balm and the expansiveness that you just gave us. But we thought we might also invite us to acknowledge that these are very complicated, difficult times, and they have been. And it doesn't seem like we have any issues activating the chat. So we thought we'd invite you all to just write, if you feel comfortable, the completion of this phrase, I'm anxious about. So just dropped that in the chat. What's tightening your heart or your spirit or complicating your people or your days? It could be big or small. And just give you a second to do a contribution in the chat, and then we'll give you a second prompt that takes it in a different direction. Life, loss and fear, democracy, communicating my ideas to the world, something our famous and esteemed and marvelous Sita knows a lot about, like, because she's going to put this beautiful book into our hands very soon, and we're going to be blessed with that. Feeding my sourdough starter in time, that is definitely something to be anxious about. Work and healthcare for my family. Polarization, time, my health. Securing a fulfilling job. Fulfillment, such a beautiful, important way of being. Mental health, loss in health, my future and being able to achieve it. Reminding us of the collective as Maya, the health of our communities, plural. Raising children that will improve the world, not harm it. I think little Felix is giving us a great head start on that one. Anxious about my family in Eastern Europe and how white supremacy is playing out in refugee crises. Human connectedness, my country, Ceylon. Future, climate, our shared humanity. Ukraine, US healthcare system, US lateral racism. My students navigating the world. I'm anxious about the future of community post-pandemic. We seem to have forgotten how to be for each other in selfless activities. General continued constant underlying uncertainty, so much uncertainty. And part of why we thought we'd invite you to share, for those who have been comfortable, thank you for doing so, is that sometimes just to name it and have it borne witness to by others, to hold the anxiety, is to just give it a little bit of room. Doesn't mean it goes away necessarily or that it's solved right away, but that there's some room for it and that we not only be beholden to it. Future for the children, our youth, and the mental health and their future. I see a whoop Felix in the chat because I think Felix is bringing lots of love. And for those who might not know, I don't know how it is possible, but that is Sita and Victor's now just more than 1 year old, brilliant, bright, mischievous spirit who has come into the world in the pandemic, and I have a sense is going to help lead with others in so many directions. My family in China, old age and broken healthcare system. And yeah, I wrote personally at the top of this prompt, I'm anxious, not afraid exactly, but anxious about the transitions in some of the elders in my life and how to hold that process and hold the kind of intergenerational space that, no surprise, Sita's helped bring into this Zoom space. I know we have people of many different generations, lived experiences, and it's great to have you all with us. And that leads me to our second prompt, which is, of course, we are not only anxious in our humanity, and as Jocelyn in her Beauty and Power of Sonics reminded us, there's so much that gives us life. So the second prompt for anybody who'd like to respond is, blank gives me life. What gives you life? So much goodness coming in the chatterfall. And we're already in the senses, food, music, lots about our people. We've got laughter, human connection, my niece, feeding others. Kindness gives me life. Spring flowers gives me life. Grandchildren, making stuff. Yeah, making stuff is amazing. Art gives us life. Doing the work that we love gives us life. Sun, art, making art, the natural world, the cacophony of applause, which I could hear every time Sita smiles or Felix's name comes up. Poetry, singing, laughing, my friends, my mama, my nibbling, food and sunlight. Pleasure, imagine that. Pleasure gives us life. Community, empathy, ambition, ocean, earth, fire, wind, panorama, sunshine. Angela reminds us that naming ancestors gives us life. Fresh lettuce from the garden. Seeing my students' reactions to writers they haven't read, museums, writing, my family, community dance, food, taking care of my animals, my flowers, my art. I'm really struck by this, the sensations, the relations, right? The vibrancy that comes through and what we're saying to each other tonight gives us life. Vulnerable, soulful conversations. Beautiful. I haven't had the privilege of reading this manuscript in the making, Sita, but I have a sense that there's quite a lot of vulnerable, soulful, fantabulous conversations that will be in our world soon, vis-a-vis your shepherding of this beautiful book. Humor, thank you. Humor, humor, humor. Saltwater, I feel like people are reading my journal. Music and performing, listening to brilliant people, helping others. Helping others gives me, because me is never singular, right? Life, helping my friends, crying together, something I did at dinner tonight with an old friend. Generous thought, humanity, everyday folks doing extraordinary things, quality time with loved ones, and of course, soul food. All kinds of beautiful life in the chat. So if you're needing a pick-me-up, just feel free to scan this amazing chatterfall. There's all kinds of beauty coming over the precipice and into the shared space. And I think, Ms. Belmach, that leads us to you.
I'm so glad that I'm gonna back up. I have these elements in the manuscript, and I knew that I was going to print them all out, and that Pato's prompt would call in one of them. So what I've been thinking about in writing this book is these elements that I want to see in my own work and in the work of others. And one of the elements is wonder. And so I'll read an entry from Wonder. Wonder, the pace and weight of a dandelion seed floating in the air. It is a feeling produced by experiencing something that does not seem possible. It is what happens when, as Emory Douglas says, you make something out of nothing. He also calls this art. He also calls this magic. Wonder is the night sky with too many stars to count. It is the line drawn between the stars that make up constellations. Often wonder makes itself known in our inability to explain how wonder is produced. It is often believed that if looked at too closely, wonder will slip away or simply disappear. If looked at too closely, wonder will tell you that at times it has kept us safe. In circumstances where mind and body have parted ways, wonder makes its home in the mind, offering us another world to inhabit when the physical world is too much. Billions have been spent on dissecting and reproducing the conditions for wonder. Wonder can be felt by diving into a pool of plastic sprinkles. This kind of wonder accepts visa. It is wonder for wonder's sake. It leaves us hungry for more wonder while hungry birds digest the pellets caught in the cuff of our jeans and scattered unknowingly along Market Street. The true potential of wonder is in its coupling with criticality. The sleight of hand that strikes us as wonderful. This is made possible with Black and brown hands, the hands of the workers, the wonder builders. Wonder and power reside here, knowing that there are things that are only possible together that are not possible alone. Adjacent words include play, imagination, creativity, curiosity, and magic. And it was called to mind in the What is Giving Me Life right now because the dandelions are blooming. The dandelions are blooming. I love dandelions as a kid, and my son has recently kind of learned about dandelions, and he can't see one without asking me to go and pick it for him. And it's, I always told myself as a kid, if I could grow a garden, it would be full of dandelions. I have some questions and images to share with you as I've been thinking about belonging and survival. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Here we go. All right. And as I ended with the question in wonder, what is possible together that isn't possible alone? This is something that as a collective member, I think about all the time, because it can be hard and it can be easy. And the hard and easy just is, but to me, what keeps me in collective, what keeps me in community is that I can see the possibility of what we can do together that isn't possible alone. Who is it for is another question. I find this to be a North Star in a lot of my projects. It can be yourself. I think the reason that this book has been so difficult is because in a big way, I think that this book is for myself. And that's really hard. But as I also think about the projects that we, do and that I make as an artist, there's always somebody that if nobody comes to the opening, if nobody, hears about the event that you do, that you still need to keep in mind the one person for whom it is for, and that one person that you need to do right by. And that who do I need to be right by? That's another, I think as artists, we're looking often for kind of the parameters of the rules. Pato and I have talked about the guardrails a lot. And this is one of those guides that I actually think is really generative and really clarifying for me. That at times has taken the guesswork or the self-doubt out of it. I was like, oh, well, I'm having all this doubt. Well, I told an elder I was going to go over with dinner. So I better show up with dinner or else that relationship's, gonna be needing a lot of repairs. So, who do you need to do right by? And I think about our work as People's Kitchen Collective, and this is Saqib Kawal and Jocelyn Jackson and myself, co-founders of People's Kitchen Collective and growing. And this is one of our meals on the right. This was a meal that we held in the streets of West Oakland at the intersection where little Bobby Hutton, the first member of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, was murdered by police with 1,500 bullets over that, I think. And we were holding events in the warehouse, dinner meals, seasonal meals in that warehouse indoors. And Saqib had a vision about, kind of just inviting Oakland to sit down at a table. And this is what you're seeing. Emory Douglas, Panther, he very generously allowed us to reproduce the Panther image along with other artists. Here you'll see in the posters. It's another image of the table. And I start with this collective work because I think that this collective work has inspired me, supported me to be more bold in the projects that I make individually. You got somebody that's got your back. And I, even though that this particular project so what you're looking at right now is a giant piñata in the form of a border wall that was produced in 2016, right before the election that brought Trump into power. And I preface the collective work because even though this was initially started out as a solo project, it became a collaborative project. And it was something that I was absolutely inspired to be, that bold, impractical, let's get this giant piñata off the ground. Saqib was the one who came in the gallery and told that to me. He's like, Sita, it's kind of lame on the ground. You gotta lift it up. And I was like, how? And so, we had what made a really lame border wall and a really brilliant piñata. This project really changed my practice. And it was also really beautifully documented in a KQED video produced by Kelly Whalen. I hope you have a chance to see that. But it involved so many people using unexpected skills: pinata makers, DJs, cooks, designers, community members, neighbors. But it's so many folks in how this thing that was trying to tear us apart, that even the idea of the wall was actually bringing us together in this piece to build something else. The piñata bricks were made by Victor Martinez and Paco Leon in the center. There was a scale model that was produced by Isaias Martinez, who's on the right. Cici Carpio from Trust Your Struggle tagged it, thinking about the life cycle of the wall. And and to go back to this idea of the piñata, I don't think the wall should not exist. And if I was going to build something that I did not think should exist, then I was going to make it out of materials that are not meant to last for very long. And that's true of many of the materials that I work with: food, piñatas, all sorts of different, materials that are meant to kind of either return back to the land to be consumed or transformed by our bodies. I'm introducing this picture because this is a family photo, and it was taken by my father, and it is my mother on the right and my grandmother in the center and my other grandmother on the left. And this photo I didn't know existed, and I didn't actually really realize that my two grandmothers had been in the same room together, and I had never shared that space with them until I was at my first artist residency after grad school. And so when I was holding this photo, and I was having a full-blown art crisis. And that crisis was that if I had this picture in my hands that meant more to me than anything that I could produce, then why the hell was I an artist? What was the point? I already had this important thing. And I remember Angela Hennessy had this, I had a studio visit with her. I was real stuck at the time. And she said, Sita, if your studio, was about to burst in flames, like, what would you take with you? What would you? And I sat and I couldn't think of anything except for these family photos. I was convinced that I needed to do many other things other than art, but of course I had a deadline coming up, which is always helpful because we can't overthink things as artists. And I ended up producing this piece at Montalvo for this exhibition, where I had them cut out a hole in the gallery wall. I sat behind it. I served chai out of the wall, the hole in the wall. And if you'll see on the right corner, there's a very small replica of that photo of my grandmother's, as kind of an homage, a dedication, and also a way to tell that story. There was a lot that was lost in translation in this like famed visit when the two of them were sharing the same house. In Bengali, malo means good. In Spanish, malo means bad. Hilarity ensued. I don't know. It was just like all sorts of things. Offense. Anyway, so so it just to be able to share. And the really interesting thing, I had done projects with ice cream before. I did projects with a lot of different things, but the heat and the warmth of tea and the ritual of drinking tea actually really lent itself to conversation in a way that was really it slowed the pace down, and people expected to interact with me, which I thought was so interesting. The people on the other side of this gallery wall were actually a collective called Dignicraft that works between Tijuana and the US-Mexico border, and they had invited 3 artisans to join them. And so I became very close with the artisans, and Inez Leal, this is her studio on the left. I ended up telling her, my real hope for this project was that they would be ceramic, unglazed ceramic mugs, kind of the way that they are in India, that you drink it and then you smash it. And that's like the kind of biodegradable chai cup, right? And she went, oh my God, please, if I make cups for you, please don't smash them, but I'd love to make you cups. And so we ended up making a series of these tiny little cups that are engraved Sin Fronteras, without borders. I made a tiny little catalog to go along with my tiny little chai stall, my tiny, anyway. And so we, it's become this multi-year kind of exchange. I like to say that it's a piece about moving little ceramics across a big frontera. And in the process, I think we've created a lot of family photos like this one. If you'll think of the Pinata wall and the you know, the pictures of Dingy Craft and us in Inez's space, you know, that is one of, you know, the family photo that comes out of each of these projects is so, it becomes so important to me. This is a photo of my mother, 1959. She's at the center in Colombia. My mother is, so if you ask me why I'm an artist, one of the answers is that you have to start with my mother. She moved to the United States from Colombia in 1969 to study photography, to study art, and I, you know, I actually have her cameras right here. It's actually not the one, it's the same model of the cameras right here by my desk, and I've been using it to photograph. This is a picture of my grandfather on the top railing. This is the house that they used to live in, that used to rattle every time the train would roll by. And so I had, you know, going back to these family photographs at this point, and these are old photographs, but newly revisited by me as an artist, and kind of newly thinking about what do I do with these pictures that I think are so beautiful and so important, and so that kind of have so much weight to them that I'm almost don't know what to do with them, you know, and so I started thinking about also, for as many pictures on my mother's side of the family as we had, how many pictures we did not have, what has not ever been pictured. And so images like this is actually Fusagasuga. This is the site of the, basically it was a luxury hotel turned internment camp during World War II, where my grandfather was held in Japan, or sorry, in Colombia. 13 Latin American countries were pressured by the United States to release or detain their citizens of Japanese descent for prisoner of war exchanges. It's a very little known history, completely blows my mind for everything that I thought I knew about kind of citizenship as well, because there were, I believe, over 800 Japanese Peruvians that were exchanged. Some of them deported, quote unquote, to a country they had never known, they had never been to, because they were born in Peru. So he was held here. I'd heard the family stories about it, but there were no pictures of it. Very few people had ever been there. You know, one cousin said, "Oh yeah, I've been there, but you know, I went for like the hot springs that were nearby or something." You know, and so it really started thinking about this exchange. And so my mother and I started asking her over text message, you know, where should I go in Colombia when I visit? What should I do? I have your old camera. Where should I go? And to think about what is not pictured. One of the connections, and I think as a mixed person, I'm always looking for the intersections to the kind of points where the constellation meet. And I realized that both of my grandfathers were political prisoners. My grandparents this is Gunnar Bomek on the left and Lalita Bomek on the right. They were freedom fighters, and my grandfather was imprisoned. He also wrote this text on Matangi Hazra, who is the first woman to be murdered in the fight for independence. It was the local civil disobedience, where she insisted, I think my grandfather, if I'm remembering correctly, was actually had volunteered to carry the flag, the Indian independence flag, and she said, "No, it's too dangerous, I'll do it." And she was shot dead. And to think about like these, you know, these very different kind of movements across parts of the world that form part of this lineage, and what to do with these complex lineages. These are some of the images that I've been taking with the new camera of many of these sites. I was supposed to go to India in March of 2020, and there was a pandemic. So I haven't seen my family in India for 8 years at this point. And then these are just to give you a spatial sense of the way that this was installed as the Archive of Dreams at YBCA. And this is a self-portrait that I took of myself in an elevator in Japan using that camera. And so to think about, you know, this is a picture of the manuscript. Some of you might see your names on here as I tried to diagram, kind of think about all of the relationships, the lineages, the people that have shaped my creative practice, Who are the people that have shaped my creative practice? And what emerged for me was that I realized that I had a very different relationship to creativity at different points in my life. And so as this is the cover that was designed by the brilliant Leah Nichols, so smartly asking me to gather from my home photographs, objects, and tools that I found important to me. So you'll see spoons, and there's a little toy rickshaw, and some of these images that I just showed you, and to think about these constellation of objects. And I'm an archivist. That's another word for I keep too many things. And I, I thought that it was like so like such, it had, seeing this cover just helped me think through, oh wow, yes, I am always taking the pieces and trying to connect the dots. This is what I'm always trying to do as a person. And so this book is very much a conversation with so many people, including Deborah Hart, Pato, Hebert, Rhonda Felsman. I'll back up actually. Deborah Hart was my my high school art teacher. Pato Hebert was my mentor at Scripps College. We met 20 years ago. And Rhonda Felsman is my therapist. David Lyagel Jones is a student of mine. And Dr. Jacqueline Francis was my thesis advisor at grad school. Alicia Kurotomi Bamik, my mother. Rangalal Bamik, my father. Sakib Kaval and Jocelyn Jackson, my co-founders at People's Kitchen Collective. Victor Chavez, my partner, and a new collaborator, a new person in conversation to this is Felix Abixora, my son. And so, to think of the conversations, and there's, the conversations both in this book and in the work. So it all has me thinking of this question, who do you call in? And I think that also that invoking, Jocelyn, we're talking about ancestors, and who do we call in? Alive, dead, fictional, authors, artists, and who do you call on? Who do you call on? And a lot of times students will ask me, or people in these kind of Zoom conversations will ask me, like, so what do you do when you're stuck? And the only real answer that I have is that I call someone. And even if it doesn't unstick you, even if you go back to your computer and you're at the same place and you're still frozen, nauseous, in my case, at least you have somebody to share a little bit of that company with you. And so that is, and my segue here to that is that Jocelyn Jackson and Pato Hebert for years have been two people that I have called on as part of my constellation, as part of my creative constellation. And many of the others all of the others who I've named. I wanted to ask, actually, I'm including a few pictures of Pato and Jocelyn's work here, just to give you an idea of what they make as we go into a collective conversation. And Pato, do you want to tell us a little bit about the series Lingering, that is new work that you actually just opened yesterday in Philly, is that true? Or
yeah, there's 10 images from this series here in Philadelphia at Drexel, and there's over 30 at an exhibition at Pitzer College in the eastern suburbs of LA. So I feel grateful to be sharing this work in different places. It's a series called Lingering, and for those who don't know, I got infected with COVID, the coronavirus, very early in March 2020, and I'm still long hauling now, and as I'm in year 3, and was thinking a lot about the lingering of PPE in the landscape, the lingering of the pandemic, the lingering of the after effects and the consequences in this body. So the body of work is called Lingering, and it began once I was finally able to get out of bed in the spring of 2020 and take some very short, very slow walks in Elysian Park, which is a really large public park right in the heart of Los Angeles, for those who don't know. And it's kind of remarkable to have that much undeveloped ground in such near the center of such a large city. And I always say that that park helped me slowly rebuild my lungs and my spirit. And so I began by making images of things I would see. Shortly after the mayor closed the parks, parks being what they are and people being what we are, the caution tape was immediately taken down by people and had fallen into the dry terrain of Los Angeles' semi-arid landscape. So these are printed on silk charmeuse. This image is a selfie. I'm wearing a t-shirt that was created as a fundraiser by the queer feminist collective Body Politic. Many of their people in New York City got infected very early, and they immediately started mobilizing to care for one another. And very quickly thereafter, anyone else who needed it that they could support. And so they created a peer support group gathering information as quickly as they could about this horrific virus that so few of us knew anything about. Now that support group has people from all over the world and is thousands strong. I'm very grateful to be a member. And on this particular day in the park, I was rocking that shirt. There's a second body of work that's come out of this process, and the body of work is called Countermeasures. It's a series of spoons carved from eucalyptus, a limb that had fallen during a storm in the same park. So I'm in some ways gathering the images the park gives me, and I asked for permission and gathered the wood and then made a series of spoons. And as many of you probably know, but for anyone who doesn't, spoon theory was a way of navigating and articulating and surviving chronic illness developed by Christine Miserandino. The idea being that you start the day with just a set amount of energy or spoons, and to get up out of bed might take one of your 12 spoons of energy for the day, and to brush your teeth might take a second. And so you very quickly have to make hard, complicated choices about how you're going to expend your energy or your spoons. And so I was thinking about that, but also, as Sita and Jocelyn know so well from their beautiful practice together, what it means to care or to serve, what it means to nourish. So this particular one, and then I'll be done, Sita, is called U09.9. That's named after the classification that activists lobbied for the Center for Disease Control in this country to create, so that for any of us trying to seek care inside medical systems, we could be acknowledged by the system. Surprise, surprise, there has to be classification to do so. So that's what we're looking at. Thanks, Sita.
Thank you, Pato. Then I have images here from Jocelyn from this piece. Can you tell us, invite us all in?
Thank you, Pato, for describing so beautifully a process that is so life-driven. It really does connect with what Sita shared already, and really sets up a major through line with this project. This project, it did not break me, but it bent me into a position, into an orientation, into a perspective that I had never had before. Mostly because this project, which is called Fixed Price Menu, it really does try to investigate the death of Philando Castile by Gerardo Yanez, a police officer who really had not had this opportunity to be held accountable. In my heart of hearts, I think that every individual wants to be held accountable. And so for the first time, I actually watched this death video, and I actually avoid these videos, but I watched this death video, and it led to an ability for me to channel all the skills that I've been gathering from ancestral relationship, sewing of the tablecloth, the sculpting, the creation of the menu, the writing, like all of these pieces coming together in order to create this very once in a lifetime moment of reckoning between these two individuals who did not have time to consider life and death in that moment. It was simply a moment of death. And I feel like it's really important as artists to be in that place of reckoning, to stand in it, whatever the topic may be, whatever the issue, because it allowed me to enter into this space of really seeing what I was capable of in telling a story, what my perspective and point of view meant to the telling of the story, and to the seeking, active seeking of accountability through artistry, through the creation of a work that challenges the viewer, the experiencer, to sit at the table with them. and consider these ideas of not only life and death, but also our agency, our responsibility. This was captured with Matterport, a technology that is often used for interior spaces so that you can sort of self-guide yourself through a space. But, you know, in this time of not being able to all be at one place at one time, Matterport allows people to go through, to basically self-guide themselves through the entire table, the entire experience using these matter tags. Each one, I composed a description so that you could be your own docent, so that you could know what the recipe card means, what the meal is, you know, created from words from Philando's mother about his favorite foods. Why is it that there are 7 bullets on the table? Why are there engraved plates with the names of the attorneys, of the jurors? All of these components are cumulative. There's no simple one degree of interaction with this work. It's about accumulating the experience in total. And I really do appreciate that this technology can allow for that, for folks to experience it for themselves and to take in what is possible when we can activate the multiplicity of ourselves to consider the depths and levels of you know, artwork that is seeking social justice.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And as we come into our collective conversation, I also wanted to reach out into the audience, the virtual audience, and ask a question about tools and making, as we also, the 3 of us, talk about tools and making. And so I would love for you to type into the chat to finish this sentence. I use blank. So if everyone, I'm going to count down to 3, 2, 1, and when I say 1, if you can type in a tool that you use, anything that you consider a tool that you use. I use blank. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Textiles, breathing, love, pencils, heart, dreams, memory, listening, WeChat, carving tools, food, daydreaming, so important, sewing machine, feelings, words, mortar and pestle, sleep. All right. And then the second part of this sentence, journal, oh, imagination, notebooks and pens. All right, memories. Let's see, the second one is to make blank. So then something you make. I'm going to count down to 3 to 1 again. 3, 2, 1. To make, oh my God, home, beautiful. Art, connections, poetry, memories, something meaningful, writing, records, community garden. Pinakbet. The future, yes. I got another Pinakbet. Space, kinship, absolutely, friends, clarity, so important. Got another Pinakbet there. Yes, kanji, connection, things that grieve, repair, to make repair. Yes, how do we make repair? All right, and then the concluding sentence of this poem is, and together we make constellations of the stars.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yes, keep them coming, keep them coming. I see the sound and love, and okay, I'm gonna exit out of here, stop screen share. Oh, I'm so blurry. Let me fix that. Jocelyn, so, I almost said talking Pato. A collective brain. Jocelyn, Pato. Belonging, senses, and creativity. Our through lines, our through lines for the evening. I look to both of you too as people who just so intentionally, so beautifully, so fiercely build that sense of belonging. You have done it for me, and I know that you have done it for so many other, you've created that space for so many other people. And I'm just wondering what made you hungry for that belonging, or what do you attribute that kind of whether it's an ability, a craving, a hunger, yeah, Jocelyn.
Being lied to. Like
Hey!
straight up being lied to. I can't tell you, I love being an angry Black woman. It is one of my favorite things. And one of the reasons I like being an angry Black woman is because I realized at a certain point that I was being lied to my entire childhood. Like this experience of what the, can I cuss? Can constellations cuss? Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
What is really important for me is to spend my life unlearning and relearning. It's so important for me to have this, again, it's a reckoning feeling of a system built on lies being totally deconstructed, but in that process, having an opportunity to build, to create, in that sense of remembering, I get to find my own sense of belonging. I get to seek out belonging with my community that was also lied to, and we get to find and create a sense of truth together. Belonging for me is that truth. It's that spirit of trust that comes from finally hearing the truth. It is super disruptive to my psyche and incredibly positive to be able to surround myself with a community of folks that will not rest in the lie. They will insist on being told the truth, on creating the truth, and living a truthful version of what is possible for us as humans in this particular moment in history. Pato?
No, Jocelyn, we just need to sit with that for a second. Yeah, I mean, I love that you held lie and anger, and of course to the we, and to the possibility of a truth, you know, a collective and a co-created truth. And I think about that saying of you people about don't let nobody steal your joy, you know, as yet another response to the understandable rage. And I think that's, I don't want to reduce it to pleasure, but I think for any of us who have gone without, the power of pleasure and pleasure with one another is really, really amazing, not to simply be reduced to the body, which some of us have been reduced to historically, but that we wouldn't be absented from our body. And to be present in our bodies with each other is also sometimes to feel really hard stuff, to hold really hard stuff, but to then also make magic out of that. And I really appreciate, Sita, that you held, it's not all, but many of your lineages simultaneously as a way to invite us all into this space with you tonight, and being reminded of that multiplicity, that irreducibility, you know. And for me, Jocelyn, it's only with others and many kinds of other people and other spirits that I can begin to maybe approach the fullness that I know to be true, or at least possible. But I think, as you said, Sita, I need to be called in, and I need to call in, and I need to be with folks. I need my solitude. I'm an introvert and I'm shy and I get worn down easily, but I have to be connected with others. And knowing how hard that can be for me sometimes, Sita, out of vulnerability or insecurity or social anxiety, or all the ways I have been told I don't matter, has made me want to be with others who understand that and want to make a different world together, a different possibility together. What about you, Sita?
What was the question that I asked? Belonging. You know, I think that, you know, I realized something along the way about many of the folks who have been drawn to People's Kitchen Collective, for instance, as a, you know, as a shared space, and I realized that we were all hungry for something, especially as many of us as either, you know, having like recent relationship to immigration, right, or a sense of kind of being divorced, violently so, from knowing, you know, about our true past. And so it was like a, you know, I think that there's this great quote by Carrie Mae Weems about like art has saved my life on a daily basis, or on a multiple times, or on a daily basis. Can't remember the exact wording, but I think that I think of what I was reaching for, and that art gave me that space to put it somewhere. and also take all that I felt was poisoning me and have a way to put it outside of my body. And, you know, the art that I made in high school was, nobody needs to see it, really, you know, but it was probably the most important work that I've ever made because it kept me going. It, you know, and I, you know, Pato, you and I have talked about this because I met you shortly thereafter as I was coming out of that. And I was hungry, you know, as a college student, like, oh my God, yeah, art can be about ideas and it can be, you know, and all these people and all these things. And so, but I think that, that hunger, that need for belonging came from two places. One was this kind of, this feeling like I knew enough, especially through my parents and their stories and hearing them, that there was something outside of this America that that I needed, that was there, that predated me, was beyond me, would exist, you know, after me, that I needed to know more about. And then on a practical level, also, you know, realizing like, I need a job, I need a place to stay, I need a couch to crash on, you know, I want to go to New York, who am I going to stay with? And so that actually is what drove the cooking. I think when I saw the power of a meal to, you know, bring folks, like, you know, it's not a direct connection, but it's like, we would have a community meal. And then like the next day I would see people in that group chat being like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Hey, I'm looking for a place to live. Hey, you know, and I knew there was a connection between that sharing of space and people feeling like maybe they had another person to call on, somebody, you know, that they could reach out to for support. So I think that's what made, you know, made me maybe kind of obsessively built that support network, right? As somebody having relatively few family members in this country, and many others and others. I'm also struck by, in both of you talking about like this, so there's like this, you know, the overwhelm of like too many things, but then there's this kind of full self, or like the presence thing, like being present with the you know, that both of you referred to. And I realized that what we each share is that we really, you know, we have these embodied practices, and I think integrate the senses into the experience of our work in different ways. And I have recently kind of had this realization that a lot of the work that around scent or around food that I was doing was a way of grounding myself. Like I couldn't meditate for years, couldn't do it, couldn't sit still, but I was studying perfuming. And so I would smell, and that was the way of taking a breath. And so like in some way my subconscious like was drawing me to make this work that I needed, again, to survive, but I couldn't articulate that. And I'm just wondering what the connection, like the kind of, what is the body connection for you as makers?
I think that's so important, and I'm going to express it in a way that might seem a little odd. My background is that my bachelor's was fine arts, and then I immediately went to law school, and I could not pass the bar. It was my third try. Well, the first time someone stole my stuff overnight, so that doesn't count. So the third try, I passed the bar and passed it high enough to, you know, wave into different regions or different areas. The difference being that when I studied that time, I studied as an artist. I studied because at first, before going to any book, I opened my senses. I read poetry, I listened to music. I ate something like delightful to myself, and then I studied. And that for me is an example of how the body responds to being enlivened, to being activated from many different directions and being exposed to many different disciplines, and sloughing off this idea that you can only be singular in direction in order to achieve something. You need the activation of multiple realities, multiple senses, in order to really get to the heart of your intelligence, to get to the heart of your understanding, to get to some version of what it means to be in the world in any given moment, because there is some sublimating that happens as we walk through the world to focus on one thing at a time, to look in this direction. But in reality, our brain absorbs everything. We don't have the memory of it at hand, but our brain is meant to be in this sensorial pleasure all the time. And I want to embrace that in the work that I do. I want to provoke that in the work that I do. I don't want someone to sit at a table and not be fundamentally shifted in their point of view because they've been stimulated very intentionally. And that curation is something that is liberatory. That is something that invites people into a collective world building. And I'm so grateful that we get to do work that does that on purpose.
You gonna go next? Do you want me?
No, you're gonna go next.
Yeah, I mean, when you started engaging scent, I loved that all of your brilliance and your criticality also could be embodied. It wasn't only, as I say, neck up, right? But that reminded me, seeing the growth in your practice reminded me to tap the wisdom of the body, as I think Jocelyn's reminding me to do tonight. And how much is there if I listen to where am I tight? When am I relaxed? Who am I holding my breath around? Who makes me feel like I can let the masks go? And what might it mean to make work in that awareness with others in that awareness that might invite that awareness, and not just awareness, but really other ways of being. And in some ways, in speaking to the two images you shared, Sita, I spoke to the question you just asked, like living with the chronic illness requires that I make friends with what my work husband, George Ayala, calls the uninvited guest. And can't help but listen to a body whose, as I say, whose corporeal compass is skewed. Like what I thought the wisdom and direction of the body was doesn't hold anymore. So it's really quite disorienting. And there's no choice but to stay present with that, and returning to the body and to something as simple as a walk or trying to breathe, or then attuning to what else was around, even if it was PPE and now trash in the landscape, was a way to not only be limited to the virus or this body, but to be reconnected again. And there's something really powerful about that, really powerful, because you're connected to energy much larger than a singular self. I mean, the skin is just a membrane, right? We're actually composed of so much microbes. More than half of us are things that we might not think of as ourselves, and we're breathing the same air, which is not to flatten us into each other, sort of assume that we're all the same at all. And I think it's precisely because of the histories of the way so many of our bodies have been surveilled, controlled, violated, displaced, murdered, that to come into the power of the body and the sensory, not only and not against this false split of head and body, but into our fullness, is to maybe have that chance of being in touch with something like pleasure, something like the sacred, something like one another. And again, it does not surprise me that when we asked what gives you life, so much of senses and others and relations came through in the chat, right? So in some ways, the collective wisdom of everybody here is reminding me some of the answer to your question.
Both of what you're saying is actually reminding me of what I wrote for the element of intuition. And I understand why as educators, we're always asking students to say why, to explain why did you choose red and not green? Why did you choose blue and not yellow? But there is also something that is really important about intuition that I felt like that was kind of post grad school. I really had to learn a lot about because quite frankly, I had kind of lost it. And I actually wanted to read this entry that I wrote. Intuition, a truth known before or beyond language. Intuition is feeling into knowing, a river rock lowering into place in the gut, sometimes accompanied by tears, not of sadness, but of resonance. There are voices that might speak into one ear or pace in circles. Is that intuition? It can be difficult to discern. Intuition speaks from the center, clear, unhurried, confident, offering guidance, freeing up, bringing ease to decisions big and small. If a response is not intuitive, it can be accompanied by a restlessness that will not settle until you are able to release what you hold and listen. Other times it happens so quickly that it is impossible to know how you arrive. Does intuition leave proof? Although intuition is a truth, it is rarely admissible as evidence. If you also believe your intuition to be an unreliable witness, the itching, twitching, and gnawing will not cease until it has your attention. Audre Lorde asks, what are the words you do not yet have? What do you need to say? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them still in silence? She does not ask us for proof. She asks us to externalize our intuitive knowledge as a life-saving measure, to give form outside the body to words we do not yet have. Although we act intuitively every day, intuition can be learned, developed, and modeled. This also means that it can be socially conditioned. Without criticality, intuition can be easily confused with instincts, projections, and wishful thinking. Can identify other as threat, danger. Was life ending for 992 people shot and killed by police in America in 2018? Criticality can be a bridge back to intuition, can be a bridge back to criticality. Adjacent words include feeling, gut, emotion, instinct, knowledge. You got something to say, Jocelyn?
I always have something to say, Sita. I try to keep myself and give you, but I'm just excited. See, this book needs to be in this world. And funny thing is, the book is in the world, so it's just a matter of time. But what really gets me when I'm looking at, and the ones that we were able to access during this preparation for this event were wonder, intuition, criticality, belonging, and free. This lexicon of Sita is fundamental because there is something really important, and you really bring it out in criticality and intuition around power. And I want us to know that that is one of the tools of an artist. There is something truly magnificent in the way that we can express, reveal, manipulate even, provoke these relationships of power. And when I'm talking about intuition, one of the things that resonates so highly to me, especially knowing you for just a little wink of time, not a long time, Sita, we have several decades to go. But what I know now is that there is such an honoring in this idea that intuition is sometimes a betrayal. We have lived experiences that train us to do, react, feel in a protective way, in a coping way, in a surviving way. Intuition, when set free, when empowered, again, from these lies of our society, whatever form they may take, that empowered intuition is so much freedom. And so when you are able to leverage your artistic practice onto that liberated and empowered intuition, it is remarkable to see the truth that you are able to manifest. And it's often because of collaboration and the joining and matching and aligning of intuitions. It's not a solitary intuition that's truly free or true, right? It's something that is collectively held. And so I really get to the heartbeat of it when I see your work and I see your instinct to be like, wait a second, my intuition is not complete yet. It's not complete yet. And you know this, and your ancestors are talking to you. They're like, it's really fantastic to see that there is something truly specific in the way that you are able to find your sense of completion in a work based on the matching of intuitions, based on the fact that people are leveraging power to pursue something that is collectively created, right? There is something really deeply important about how your practice has evolved in that way that I think this book expresses. This book is the tool for that kind of liberation. And yes, I have more to say.
Would you like to say it, or does
No, I'm going to be generous.
You're saying is generous, Jocelyn. Yeah, I too would signal a lot of praise and anticipation, gratitude rather, and anticipation for these distillations, Sita. And I really appreciate how you make room for the not knowing. So even as much as you're distilling in this book and the beauty that you just shared with us and what you read about intuition, I feel you are so often giving yourself enough room to not know, which is to say to keep asking, to keep massaging and dancing with wonder. And I really appreciate that, because it's a very vulnerable thing to do publicly and with others, and when so much is at stake politically. And it can get confusing, right? When the intuition skews to the point of being disorienting. And I really appreciate, Jocelyn, the reminder that it's a collective intuition. That's why we have and need each other. But I love that you opened, and see, my COVID brain can't hold it, Sita. I was going to say sparkler, but that's not what you said. Did you say torch?
I think flare.
Flare, right? I love that. And then it went off camera and somebody's like, hey, what happened to the flare? You know, and like, that is also so Sita to me, the sense of pleasure every day. It's there and it's transforming right before us. There's an aliveness in what you do that I really, really appreciate, because it's so different. You are deeply wise and expert in so many ways, but it's not about flexing as if you've achieved a thing that is unobtainable to most and therefore to be commodified, etc. You know, it's actually in process. It's breathing and alive and messy and magical. And I really appreciate that. We ran into each other. I'm trying to remember when this was. I want to say 16 or 17, 2017, somewhere not in the US. We didn't know we were each in this country. We found that out and we meet up. And I said to you, you seem good. You seem just grounded and good. Not that you hadn't been before, but I was really struck. And you said, yeah, you know, Pato, I feel that. And I feel that because I'm in community and I'm accountable. You were so clear. It's like, I got to write that down. Sita's pearls just dropping. But I'm thinking a lot about that, and how you're modeling that for us tonight. And I think the book does too. Model starts to become a big word, but invite. The book's going to keep inviting that, which your work has been inviting and teaching us for a long time now. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm thinking about this word accountable that you've used in thinking through your work. And for some reason, maybe I'm dating myself, Miss Lauren Hill came to me, and that beautiful line. And I was thinking about reciprocity through Indigenous frameworks and what it means to be in right relation, right? And how much that requires stewardship and care. It's not a fixed thing you do once and then it's good, especially after 500 plus years, right? So for some reason, Lauren Hill came to me, and I do think accountability is important. And what you, Jocelyn, were reminding us about those who have not been held to account. And I also think that reciprocity as part of that process is really beautiful. And she's singing to this, I imagine it a lover, it could be a family member, but what do I have to do to get some reciprocity, right? And I think there's a lot of reciprocity in your work, Sita, and generosity. And that's not counter to criticality or fierceness or rage or urgency or all the other things that the moments we're living through necessitate in some ways, or at least produce. And I really appreciate that reciprocity.
Thank you. You know, the belonging, the term for belonging was originally accountability. And so I was thinking about wonder, intuition, criticality, and accountability is the last one. And I talked about it with Jocelyn. I had this long kind of argument with a friend curator of mine, Bill Kelly Jr. And he was like, that's not the word you're looking for, Sita. And I was like, yes, it is. And then months later, I was like, you're right. That wasn't the word I was looking for, you know. And I do think that they're adjacent terms. And I think there was a bit of anger, right, of behind that, of wanting, you know, being really disappointed in some, you know, folks, even, you know, creative people, and this kind of like the and not being accountable to the moves that they were making in the world, right? And but I do think that belonging is more expansive, and it's been a lot more productive as a term to think through of how you know, how I have found belonging through art, through creative practice, through different kinds of creative practices, whether it's cooking, making. Yeah. Hello, Adrian.
Listen, I could hear you. I could listen to y'all talk forever. I've just been here like, yes. So we got some time for Q&A, but before that, can I jump in with something? I just really want to thank you three for, I think, what is really just such a life-affirming conversation, especially as an artist of color, who doesn't necessarily work or always work in English or in colonial languages. And, you know, what you're offering to us, especially you, Sita, and I think everyone can kind of attest to this, both in the chat and among the co-panelists as well, is a framework to create and imagine otherwise outside of and refusal against, beyond, and after white supremacy, after capital, right? A creative practice that is rooted in communal life, in the commons, and reimagining or touching a commons that was always there through our creative practice. And that's from Jose Esteban Munoz and the Brown Commons, right? But I'm really excited for your work. I think all of us are. My question, I mean, more common the question, but my question is, how do you see, you know, what sorts of practices, like life-giving creative practices, are you excited about right now? What do you, especially from younger artists, newer artists, or artists that are taking their work in different directions?
I don't want to take the first response away from you, Sita, but I will, because this is where we're going to go feel it. Felix, this is that moment.
Yeah.
There's a quiet certainty in having access to youngers, to their perspective, to their frivolity, to their curiosity, and it seeds personal wonder in a way that is so important and delightful, and challenging and maddening at the same time as well, right? There is a way that we get to, and I'm speaking of my little nibblings now, these youngers that are able to give us access to ourselves again, you know? And I feel like that's, as a practice, as an artist, it's one of the most rare and necessary things, to be given and granted access to yourself again from an adult perspective. And I want that to be so much of the way that we practice life, that we are always engaging with youngers and elders in their storytelling, in their play, in their ability to witness, and in their ability to not give a fuck. I want all that for us.
I'll interject with the short thing before I pass it, Pato, but I've been thinking about this question of how do we be more ourselves in the world? And I do think that that is a life, affirming practice, because, you know, that has been life ending for so many people not to be able to live as themselves in the world. But how do we be more ourselves in the world in every, you know, part of our lives? And that does not mean that you don't have to clean the bathroom, or, you know, be a good community member and, you know, do things that you don't necessarily like doing every once in a while. But I think that there, you know, how do I live my life as my full self is a constant negotiation. Yeah. Pato?
Well, based on what you and Jocelyn has said at the start and just now, I think it involves dandelions and asking mom to like go pluck one every time we see it. I really love that, and thinking about wonder and certitude, as you just reminded us, Jocelyn. Like, I really love that, and I love the fierceness of young people. And I love that people are unafraid to speak their exhaustion, their disappointment, their critique, their enough. They're enough, right? And there's a danger that we could only be cynical and bitter and mistrusting. But if we can hold the criticality that says these have not served us, we've known that for a long, long time. And we may or may not know all the ways we could be different, but we know enough of them, and we've been practicing them for a long time. And as you said a minute ago, Adrian, like that refusal can be present, but not the only position we get stuck in, right? There's something really, really fierce right now among young people that gives me so much hope, so much hope. And that creativity is irrepressible. And yeah, I can name where I see that in different artistic practices. Just hang out on TikTok. I mean, right, which isn't to uplift that platform so much as say people will take any space they can get, and they'll take it even if it's not there. And listening for where that creativity is part of what excites me. And the other thing I would say is that, you know, we were talking about the senses. I hear so much about the somatic in activists and organizing circles. There's so much at least naming and at best trying to attend and hold to the needs of the body and one another as part of the work, rather than at the expense of ourselves and each other to quote, get to the work or the real thing. And that's a very promising shift that the newer generation is helping to kind of hold front and center. And that sometimes takes the form of being able to talk about mental health in a way that has been taboo in our communities for so long, even though we don't have the resources yet that we need, and that should always be there. But there's a naming going on that is really massaging at the stigmas and massaging at the silences, even if those knots are still all up in us. And that really excites me. So the artists that are holding that complexity and not the expense of joy and delight and pleasure really excite me.
I just, oh yeah, go for it.
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you're going to say.
I was just gonna to chime in also, right? Like this,
Yes, please.
it's a couple things. One, like why I love my work as a teacher, right? It's you know, we in the, you know, Imperial Western Academy, we come at it as pedagogues to say, oh, we're supposed to mold these subjects. I'm like, no, that's bullshit, right? The knowledge is there, right? The entire work is to provide the space for that knowledge to germinate. And, you know, like working with younger folks.
Even the idea of molding sounds like incarceration.
Absolutely, right? The disciplinary structure of teaching at the university, right? So I love the alternative sort of figures that we've been advancing, but also Pato, to your comment on the somatic, right? Like revolution needs to be nourished, decolonization needs to be nourished, right? It needs to be felt, it needs to be desired, and that desire needs to be, you know, fueled in creative practice as well as other practices.
I just thank you so much for adding those pieces. It makes me want to speak more to there are these moments where I reach out to Sita. I say, Sita, how do I be an artist? Like literally, what do I do next? How does this work? And it's that process that I want to encourage as well. Like studio visit, just do studio visits, whether it's virtually, whether it's in person. Be in that place of asking each other, what is this that I'm doing that is true? And for me, a lot of that has been excavating the tools of my ancestors and of my memories and of my dreams of what could be, and intentionally using those to provoke creative action. Another thing, another device that is popularized more and more is a daily artistic practice, making something each day. And I've instituted that as well in a very low stakes kind of way. but making every day reminds me that it is in me, as opposed to the gaps, the long times of just like, ooh, this is the famine phase. And I really lose confidence. I lose, sense of artistic reality in those gaps, me personally. And so having the daily practice, the daily creative practice, creates the momentum that reminds me this is part of me. And the last thing I'll say in those sort of the pieces and practicality, sinking, the sinking feeling in my stomach right now. I'm doing a project right now, a writing project that's seeking justice for my brother who was murdered 32 years ago. And I needed to bring art to it. This is something that happened when I was 15 years old. And it's only as I'm accessing it from an artistic perspective that I'm able to see the power of what accountability means and what restorative justice means, what that can be, and writing it into existence. So it really is the excavation of tools, of materials, of memories, and really having that opportunity to be vulnerable with other artists that feels so important to us getting even deeper into the practice of art being transformative.
Absolutely. We have time for one more question. I wish, well, we can talk after also, but I wish this would go on forever too, and just get, if we were in person, right, we could have these like little nice conversations on the side. But the last question I want to ask is from Dr. De Jesus here, and she says, and I'll write it on the answer live. Yeah.
One, to interject right before, we had somebody ask a question about asking for permission, mentioned a few times, and wondering if you have a process for asking permission to use materials, to access your own ancestral intuition, to your full selves. And that just, I wanted to, both an invitation and also a permission asking that part of what we're offering to everyone today is actually a kit of materials. Someone was asking also about process, methodology process we can use to connect the dots of intersectionally accountability. And so I actually worked with Karina Hui and Leah Nichols to develop some materials for yesterday. We had a workshop called Tracing Our Origins. And everyone who basically fills out the form after this talk and provides an address can get one of these kits that we're designing with Kaya Press in the mail, which is super exciting. And so hopefully that speaks to some of that. And the kit is inspired by the conversation we've had today. And so us as the speakers, and also the responses to the prompt in the chat. So, if there's anything that you don't want to be kind of included possibly as we think about our inspirations, please just contact any one of us, but it will be the, your responses to the prompts and then our conversation here. So just wanted to address those two very wonderful questions. And then Adrian, yes, please.
Yeah, the last one is, as we emerge very slowly from this pandemic time, what ideas can you share with us as makers, theorists, teachers to center all that we've learned from these years of loss and isolation to maintain our focus on belonging, collective intuition, and radical love?
I'm going to say for me that it's about big and small ways to do that. And I think that I get a sense of overwhelm for myself in that question too, of what Melvin Escobar, who's a therapist and facilitator that we work with at PKC, calls it future tripping. Do that a lot. We're just like, I got that question, then I was like, immediately I was, somewhere 20 years from now. in my mind, it time traveled real fast. And so then I there was a part of me that went, oh, Sita, bring it back to something small, to something, and so whether it's the dandelion moment or one of the owners of Marcus Books here in Oakland told me, Sita, it's about small, repetitive, continued actions. not big ones right now. And so that, I think, you know, whether that's like, you know, different ways of moving something forward. So that's what came to mind. I'll pass it to someone else. Pato, you're leaning forward.
Yeah, I was just because I was hoping to hear more from you. I would just maybe echo that and say big shared vision, but cultivating what's necessary in the here and now, and using the growing of food. You so beautifully honor traditions and histories, you and Jocelyn and PKC. But I also think about the cycles that produce the food or grow, to use a better word, the food that then gets enacted. And I know you're both involved in lots of those processes. And so big shared vision, but also cultivating, which happens in cycles and over times and has to weather storms, and necessarily involves lots of folks and stewarding the land as part of that process.
So good. I want to be marinated in your thoughts, basically. Pato, Sita, one of the things that also comes up, and I think in our guests, Angela would agree, I feel like one of the ways that we keep the joy and the radical love is really centering the grief and the mourning process. It's not counterintuitive, it's actually essential. I feel like we are in a phase of bypassing that process, and it is not going to serve us well. Without the deep mourning that's required of this pandemic and its ongoing impact on us, mentally, physically, we're not going to be able to be resourced enough to really engage the intimacy required for joy, for radical hospitality, for love in a ever-increasing regard. So I really want us all to pay great attention to our skills and our practice when it comes to not only acknowledging, but deeply resting and learning from our grief, because there's so much love in it.
I just want to thank you three for what an amazing, life-giving, life-affirming, and creative and constellational, if that's even a word, it is now, conversation with you all. Thank you to the organizers. Should I pass it over to Marie or to do closing? Or any of y'all have final thoughts?
Sita, can you just remind me one time, and everybody else, how do we get this magic constellation in our hands and world?
That's right.
Sita, you're muted.
Mute.
Hello. All right. So Neela just put the pre-order for We the Constellations of the Stars into the chat. Forthcoming January 2023, and so excited. And so yeah, that is how and who with all y'all. Thank you so much. So many people, and I also, just to mention, so many people named and unnamed, and that I can see in the chat that are, you know, who I have friends, mentors, early readers, who have shaped this process. And just a word about Kaya Press. Kaya Press is the most unique. Neela said it was one of the joys of her time at Kaya Press to be working on this book, and I echo that. And I'm so grateful for that generosity. But Sunyoung Lee is a mastermind, creative artist, mad scientist. And like any good collaboration, we now share a part of our brain, or at the moments that we collaborate, and it is such a rare experience, and it's something that I didn't know I needed as a creative person.
Sita, there's a femme celebration going on in the chat, and people didn't realize they needed some lippy, as somebody called it, and there's a call for knowing the link to your beautiful
Oh,
lipstick. So whether that's going to be in the packets that go to everyone or there's a link to be shared, there's a very much a femme celebration happening in your honor. So just need you to know that.
it's the Sephora super matte. It's like the lip, it's the wand thing that the it looks like gloss, but it goes on matte, and it literally you can eat a whole meal. And it stays on.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you everyone so much for coming. And don't forget to pre-order. Don't forget to provide your information for the little gift boxes that'll come after the event. And we'll see y'all soon for another Visions and Voices.